Here's the plan. Whenever a cheese listing becomes published, we need to create a notification that is sent to users. Maybe some users have subscribed to hear about all the latest new cheeses. To help sort of fake this system, I've created a cheese notification entity. The goal is to insert a new record into this table each time a cheese listing is published. It's not a real notification system, but it'll be an easy way for us to figure out how to run custom code in just the right situation. Let's start, like usual, with a test. We want to assert that after we send the put request, there is exactly one cheese notification in the database. Now, thanks to Foundry, the library that helps us insert dummy data both in our data fixtures and in our tests, before each test case, our database is emptied. That will make it very easy to count the number of rows inside the table. Oh, and if you love this database resetting feature of Foundry and want a performance boost in your tests, check out Dama Doctrine Test Bundle. Anyways, thanks to another cool feature from Foundry, doing this count is easy. Cheese notification factory : repository arrow assert count 1. How nice is that? A dead simple way to count the records in a table. I'll even give this a nice message in case it fails. There should be one notification about being published. I love it. But before we try this and make sure it fails, let's go one step further. Copy the put call from up here and paste it below. Because we want to make sure that if we publish the same listing again, it should not create a second notification because we're not really publishing it again. We're not doing anything with this second call. Use the same assert. Cheese notification factory : repository arrow assert count 1. Okay, let's try it. Find your terminal and run just this test. Symfony PHP bin/php unit -- filter equals test publish cheese listing. And failed asserting that 0 is identical to 1. There should be one notification about being published. Okay, so how can we accomplish this? Well, we know that we need to run some code right before or after the cheese listing is saved. That means that we need a custom data persister. Cool. We've done that before with user data persister. Create a new PHP class and call it cheese listing data persister. Poetry. Let's keep this as simple as possible. Implement the normal data persister interface, go to code generate or command N on a Mac, select implement methods, and add the 3 methods that we need. Before we fill in the code, let's immediately inject the doctrine data persister so that we can use it to do the actual saving. Add public function __ construct with data persister interface decorated data persister. I'll hit Alt-Enter and use initialize properties to add that property and set it in the method. Down in supports, wait, I almost forgot. We need to make sure the right data persister is passed to us. Open config/services.yaml, and we can just copy the user data persister service and change it to cheese listing data persister, because we need the same doctrine data persister service. Okay, back in the persister, the supports method is easy. Return data instance of cheese listing. Yep, if a cheese listing is being saved, we want to handle it. In persist, call this arrow decorated data persister arrow persist data, and in remove, this arrow decorated data persister arrow remove data. Congratulations! We just created a data persister that does the exact same thing as before. We can prove it by running the test and enjoying the exact same failure. There are still no notifications. Back in persist, the question is, how can we detect if the item was just published? I'll add a little PHP doc above the method to help my editor. We know that data will definitely be a cheese listing object. So the easiest thing to do would be to say, if data arrow is published, then the listing was just published, right? I'm sure you see the problem. That would tell us that the listing is published, but not that it was necessarily just published. It may have already been published and the user was just changing the description or something. We simply don't have enough information. What we really need is access to the original data, the way it looked before it was changed by API platform. If we had that original data, we could compare that with the current data and determine if the isPublished field did, in fact, change from false to true. But how can we get that? Actually, thanks to Doctrine, this is easy. Doctrine already keeps track of the original data, the data that came back when it originally queried the database for the cheese listing. To get the original data, we need the Entity Manager. Add a second argument to the constructor. Entity Manager interface Entity Manager. Hit Alt-Enter to initialize that new property. Then, in persist, we can say original data equals this arrow Entity Manager arrow get unit of work. That's a very core object in Doctrine. Arrow get original entity data and pass it data. How cool is that? Let's dump that original data to see what it looks like. Let's go. Run the test. And cool. It's an array where each key represents a field of original data. It shows isPublished was false at the start. We are so dangerous now. Remove the dump and add a new variable. Was already published. Set to original data, left square bracket, is published, question mark, false. Because if this is a new entity, original data will be an empty array. And if this is a new cheese listing, then it was, of course, not already published. Finally, if data arrow get is published and not was already published, we know that it was, in fact, just published. So let's create a new notification. Notification equals new cheese notification, and its constructor accepts the related cheese listing object and the notification text. Cheese listing was created. Oh, and we need to save this to the database. This arrow entity manager arrow persist notification, and this arrow entity manager arrow flush. And yes, you could skip the flush because a few lines later, the Doctrine data persister will call that for us. We're technically saving both the notification and the cheese listing on this line, but it doesn't really matter. So, did we do it? Let's find out. At your terminal, go test go. It passes. Woo! The original data trick is really the key to doing custom things on a simple, RESTful state change, like isPublished going from false to true. Next, let's use this same trick to accomplish something else. Let's add complex rules around who can publish a cheese listing and under what conditions. Like, maybe the owner can publish the listing, but maybe only if the description is longer than 100 characters. Except that an admin can always publish, even if the description is too short. Yikes. Typical, awesome, confusing business logic. Let's crush it next.